Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk with Tia and Jill. We are so happy to have you here with us and our very special guest, Angela. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here and also the audience. Here we
Yeah.
are, right? Last week of May.
Ooh,
Last week of May, isn't it? Yes.
my goodness. Wow. I didn't even think about it, but yes, it is the last week of May. Time has
Yeah,
flown by.
it has. And so, of course, we always want to know like where people are joining us from. Like, where are you this last week of May listening in? Or if you're even on replay, share with
Mhm,
us where
mhm.
you're joining from.
Yeah, and we're coming out of a holiday weekend here in the States. So I'm actually traveling. I'm in Tennessee this week.
Hmm.
In Baltimore. Still the same side of the country, so similar weather, right? It's beautiful here, so we're having a great time here in Tennessee.
Awesome.
And Angela, where are you located?
Yes, I'm in Minneapolis and we are heading into summer, some beautiful weather. We're still in the 70s, so we're not to the 80s or 90s yet, but it's gorgeous here.
Hmm.
I feel like this is the perfect time in Minnesota
It is.
to be there.
Yeah, Jill's in the area too. You can
I am.
uh,
Yes, and it is. This is the time where when people are traveling, like after school gets out, and they're like, "Don't you want to go here or there or wherever in June?" I'm like, "No,
no,
like this is like the perfect time to be
staying
here.
right
I,
here.
I want to stay."
Yes, yes. So let us know, where are you listening in from? How's the weather where you are? And then add your comments, your questions, your perspectives as we have the show today, because we have an amazing topic talking
Mhm.
about building community and corporate culture. You know, what we talk about here on the show is all about leadership and connecting it to what we do, as well as culture. So I'm excited about the topic and we want to hear from you all. So put it in the chat. We can see it. Hopefully, we can see it if technology is working correctly today, and playing nice, and we'll make sure to incorporate it on the show.
Yes. And if it is your first time joining us here at Catalyst, Tia and I are on a mission to transform how we lead in food. So often we think about IQ gets us in the door, but EQ is really what helps us drive business results and take care of our teams. And so the better we do that and improve our human skills and build community and create belonging and spaces where people really feel valued and part of what we're doing, that is when the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's right in line with the topic we're having, because really, in order to build community, and we're going to dive deep, we're really talking about those human skills, right? Like that is what the community is. It's
Mhm.
filled with humans, and being able to interact and collaborate and this sense of belonging and safe space, all of those don't just happen,
Yeah.
right? It takes intention.
Yeah.
So we will talk more and more about it, and we're happy to have Angela here on the show with us. And Angela, we'll start out. Tell us, what's your background and how did you find your way into the food industry?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm so excited to be here and be talking about this topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. So I've been in the food industry really since I was born. My parents were both in the food industry, but I found my way and my path. Through university, studied food science, got a master's in food science, and then started in product development right out of school, and have been in the industry for 15 years, primarily in the B2B ingredient side of the industry. And so I've done everything from supporting product development through ingredient innovation, primarily in the bakery side of the industry, and then moved into commercial leadership roles on the sales side, the commercial sales side of various organizations, and representing various ingredients from commodity to specialty ingredients. So over my tenure, have had a lot of experiences both from the technical side and ingredient side, touching CPG, food service, retail. And so I've been lucky to have a very rich career in this industry, and that then has spurred other initiatives that I think we're going to get to here in a minute.
Oh, yes.
We are, because as you talk about this journey and this passion that you have, it sounds like even like generational, like in food and that work. we know you also have passion in other areas. And really, we connected first because of females in food.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit more about like what is females in food and how and why did you start this community?
Yeah, thank you. Well, females in food, like all, I think all initiatives are born out of a solution to a problem. And for me, that was, a decade, I think, in the making. But 5 years ago, sat down and said, we're just not seeing enough women in senior leadership across our industry sectors. I was not seeing enough change happening quick enough. And I thought, I'm not going to sit back for another 15 years in this industry that I love so much and not do anything about it. So really started this journey of, what is it that women and our industry is needing to see gender parity at the top, specifically in that senior leadership that we know is represented by less than 25% of women in senior leadership and even less of women or people of color. And so, Females in Food was born out of this desire to see change. And what we are today is an international organization of over 1,200 women in our collective. We are the first female-focused professional platform that's focused on closing that gender gap. And we take this 360-degree approach of both developing talent and offering community that connects women across every industry sector. So we have women from retail, food service, B2B ingredients, CPG, and we're really focused on providing that external community that is so important for women to have that peer mentorship, opening doors for one another, but also the professional resources, accessibility to professional resources, and job search tools to really move their career. And then we act as a trusted advisor to companies and helping them reach their DEI and B goals. So what that looks like is helping them with talent connection, elevating their employer branding so that women in the industry know these really wonderful places to go work and what they're doing to help advance female talent within the workplace. And then also an extension helping them with some of their professional development and ERG programs. So very comprehensive as to what we're doing as a broader platform, but really supporting individuals through that community and then supporting employers to help them attract, retain, and advance more women in the workplace.
Yeah, I love that 360 approach, right? Where, I mean, that's something that we talk about here at Catalyst and provide our clients as well, where we want to support the whole being, right? The whole being and where they are today and how do we help them get to the next spot. And one of the things that you mentioned is really the supporting from an organizational standpoint. And people think about that when they think about culture and how are, in your case and what you do, really focusing on women and how they fit into the workplace and how they can belong into that workplace. And one thing that we talked about as we prepped for the show is that culture is rarely by coincidence, right? It's by intention and it's by design. So as you think about the work that you've done at Females in Food, how has that influenced how you created that community?
Yeah. And this is so it's a foundation of everything that we do, the culture and a lot of the feedback I get about our community. They're like, this is so different than any other community I've been a part of. The connections are so rich. People are really showing up and helping me. I'm moving the needle in my career and making and seeing an impact. Right. And from the very beginning, I've always said, this community, it should be for everybody, but maybe not everybody's going to choose to be a part of it because it is not a passive experience. We encourage all of our members to show up and giving as much as they take. We talk about give gets, and we all know we have skills and strengths to offer other individuals, and we're also there to get something to help ourselves as well. And so I think everybody is showing up with that shared intention, and we talk about it. Like we create these spaces that at our events, we say, what are your give gets for this event? Why are you here? And what are you looking to leave with? And I think creating those spaces, but we also set the intentions of all of our events and community and reiterate our values all the time. And so, some some of those things that we, live every single day is showing up to help each other, and keeping that as a very active part of our culture, and then creating those spaces, but also this collaboration over competition. And I think that's a really important thing that transcends into the workplace as well. We know we're all showing up with a shared interest of the food and beverage industry, of advancing our careers, but we also understand that those things don't have to exist at odds, right? We're not here to compete with one another. There can be space for all of us at the top. And that consistently creating these spaces and reinforcing our values, and then inviting people into the space, and focusing on some of the core elements of our community, which is inclusivity, providing that visibility to women, leadership opportunities, feedback, listening to the community and responding to them as to what they need, and communication, right? Like that's the heartbeat of what makes everything work. And I think we let that drop so many times in community and also in organization workplaces, which is about communicating. And that is enabling really great communication amongst individuals is paramount, right, to really good culture.
Yeah, it is. It is. I love the piece that you talked about. Just it's not passive, right? And like as you talked about the community, it's that action. You being actively involved, right? Actively taking, but also actively giving, actively communicating, actively being there. So I love that description, those specific words.
Yeah. And I think even the word you use to describe it as a collective, I think how that resonates differently than just talking about an organization or another group, or, insert some descriptor in that space. And of course, being part of Females in Food, I think about, the experience I've had based on, hearing you talk about the elements there. And I find it fascinating because what you describe, and if you're not part of the group, like, of course, I'm going to be biased and say join, but it is really this unique experience because that base expectation and value that you have with, like, it is active, and we do show up, and it is about, I don't know how many times in like the chat in the community or even in person where we've been like, oh, I thought of you for this, or someone was asking about that, or does anybody know someone in this space? And this really resourceful group of people who truly want to be helpful for each other.
Yeah.
And I think about how at work, you would think that would be something that would be like intuitive, that we're trying to all work to be, helpful for each other, but yet that doesn't just magically happen.
Yeah. And there's so much, we're all so interdependent on each other in this value chain, right? And you think about breaking down barriers for one another in the industry. To your point, somebody is crowdsourcing. Do you know a co-man in this that does this specific product? Or do you know an ingredient supplier for X? Or, we've unlocked millions of dollars in business within this community, right? And I think about in the workplace, if people are showing up genuinely with the reciprocity of helping one another, how quickly we can move through business processes or make decisions if you're showing up with that intention, right? If that's the culture within. But it takes work, right? It's such a, you can't for a second forget about it. It is, I like to think that we've created the community now. We have enough people and it starts feeding itself, and we have enough legacy members that are kind of those foundational champions of our culture and our values. And I think that's what every company should also strive for, right? Because it starts building itself, but you can't get lazy with it. You can't forget it. And because you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And and so that, I think we really have to protect culture in whatever we're doing, whether it's workplace or community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think go ahead, Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
As you're talking about that, I'm thinking about this podcast I listened to yesterday, and it was about being good stewards of the land. So a little bit different topic, but the part that really resonates here is like, how do you create stewards of culture?
Yeah.
And I think, even once again, sometimes it's the terms and how they resonate with you. But I know we're going to get to this about like everybody's part of culture, but we also still need people who are really these stewards of really being mindful and being very intentional about what's developing and what needs to be there to support the people in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people, I mean, that's right on point, Jill, because those stewards or champions or whatever you want to call them as a part of your culture, they're making way so that these elements show up, right? Like the piece around collaboration over competition, when we talked about it a little bit before on just as human beings and being in the corporate setting, we're trying to get promoted, we're trying to shine, we're trying to do that. And even some of the way that organizations reward their people, it's based on competition versus collaboration. And in order for you to switch that, you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional around how are you rewarding your people, right? What are they most rewarded for? Is it who shines the hardest and fastest and brightest? Or is it the ones who are fostering collaboration and group and culture, right? The type of culture that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting because we know money only motivates to a certain degree, right, within organizations. And, the more I've looked at organizations and what motivates people, and then as I've talked to women, and also where I've found a lot of gaps is this recognition piece. We're human. We want to be appreciated for what we're doing, right? That's not complicated, but it takes time. It takes energy. It takes intention. And I think in the workplace, that could be slowing down and recognizing somebody's work and saying thank you. In our community, one of the biggest surprises I've had in 5 years when I started out doing, and we think about member spotlights, or we ask somebody to show up and do a fireside chat to talk about a certain topic. The feedback I've gotten from women, I mean, very talented, distinguished leaders in our industry. And they're like, what could I possibly have that anybody would want to listen to me about?
Wow.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Whoa.
Wow.
Stop there. You have so much, not like
this. What do you mean?
But as women, and we I think we're the last to slow down and look at our own accomplishments and what we have to offer. And I think that was a real big pause for me as a leader of this organization, but also even for myself, but my responsibility to the community, right? To say, we have a platform here that we can help raise the visibility and elevate the thought leadership of the women in our community and the women in our industry. And I think that's also a responsibility that all of us have in the industry. One, it's most of the time free, right? To stop and acknowledge somebody's hard work. Maybe it's a shout out on LinkedIn. Maybe it's in the newsletter at work, but that goes miles. And I know for us and what we're doing in our platform, in our community, we have a responsibility and the ability to do this. And it brings us a ton of joy. But every time that I realize we still have more work to be done when we get that feedback of like, I'm honored, but what would anybody want to learn from me? Right. And it's like, there's so much. And I think we all need to slow down and show that appreciation and allow that recognition. And I do think that's a big motivator that is so often missed.
Yeah. And I love this example of just asking someone to speak, because there's been so many people that I've talked with where you're like, oh, I think you'll be great for this, right? Like, I need someone, I think you'll be great for it. They've never spoken before on a panel or by themselves. And then afterwards they're like, oh, I want to do more of that. Right.
Yeah.
And then like that's just was a spark. That's only because you asked someone to share what they know, right, on a topic that they know. And so when we think about this collaboration or even helping others, you never know what is going to spark them to step into their own power, right?
Yeah.
To step into who they are or the path that they are meant to go down. And so that's what I love about, communities and cultures that foster that type of interaction, is because you start seeing these true superstars step up
Yeah.
because they're like, ooh, I didn't know I loved doing that. I didn't even know I loved talking about this topic as much until I was out of time, right? And I had to stop because we're out of time, but I want to talk about this even more.
Yeah.
And, just that alone, I mean, I know we can think about when that moment for us was different moments throughout our careers and lives where it's like that felt really good and you appreciate the person that asked you and now you feel even more motivated to do even more.
Yeah, agree. And that much more engaged. I couldn't agree more. And I think to build on that point, I think let's go back to the intention piece of making sure we are inviting those voices to the table and having diverse perspectives represented and whether it's a speaking engagement or a panel, it's so many people are not stepping forward and raising their own hand to say, hey, I would be great on that panel, or I would be great giving that keynote. Invite me, right? Pick me.
Right.
We don't do that. And so, as leaders across the industry, we need to be stepping out of our traditional spaces and looking for those individuals to invite in, because
Yes.
nothing is going to change unless we intentionally invite other people in.
So true. So true. Stepping outside of our circles, right? That means outside of who we know, right?
Exactly.
Who can you connect with that you haven't talked to before? Who you connect with that doesn't look like you, that doesn't think like you, that's not from the same area as you. So you can not only expand your circle, right, and your perspectives, but also inviting other people into your circle. I mean, that's
I think
fantastic.
that's, at least in FIF, one of the true values of external community. I think there's so many benefits of, you can have internal communities within workplaces, right? But like stepping outside, being able to connect really meaningfully across various industry sectors, different types of people in a really meaningful way. I think external community really brings that possibility in a very accessible way to so many people, but there's 100 other examples of how to do that, right? How are we stepping out into our communities? How are we, just in general, reaching other people to make sure that we're not staying within our own spaces and pulling from the same talent or same minds.
Yeah.
Well, I think of how that parallels, even in workplaces, because there's so much talk about organizational culture right now. And of course, in the food safety space, there's a lot of talk about food safety culture. And of course, these are one and the same. And I think about, what are the things, that we've even talked about here to add to that, because so often we kind of get into the normal groups that we're working with, whether it's within our functional team or maybe a project team.
Yes.
And how we can be more mindful about opening the community up and inviting. And I think, like you said, it's active inviting people in, or actively going to seek people.
Yeah.
How, in our work, how often do we create space in our workday? And it doesn't have to be every day. Let's say every week you're like, I'm going to spend 30 minutes just going outside my normal space. Like, what are ways to be able to help, that you've seen work, or that you see that could translate from being the female in foods community to, like, how do we really make a difference for people in building community at work?
Yeah, I think you have to make the time for it, to your point. I think you need to, not eat lunch alone as a great place to start, right? Going back to the book, that Don't Eat Lunch Alone. But making the space to set up that coffee connect. I said one of the things I started missing as I got older was just the time and space in my life to go out and connect with friends. I think we start giving so much of ourselves to our families, to our spouses, to other life requirements, right? Like outside of work, your day you get very focused on completing the job, and then your evenings get busy, and you start getting
Mhm.
time to all these other things that you stop making time for networking, stop making time for community, and um, maybe as you did maybe earlier on in your career when you had maybe more time and space to do that. And so I think we have to go back and be really intentional to create that time in our day, schedule it out. I'm going to set up a coffee connect with you, 30 minutes. I just want to learn these three, I want to ask you these three questions to learn about you and what you're doing. I always frame that up and offer that to other people, and or reach out to a stranger on LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many best friends that I've had coming out of COVID that I literally did, I reached out blindly to just people that I admired, I admired their thought leadership or what they were saying online.
Yeah.
And I reached out, I sent them a note. I said, I'd really appreciate 30 minutes of your time to learn about these three things from you. And, these individuals are now like great friends of mine that I consider them part of my inner circle, and we laugh about it. But these were blind introductions that I made. So I think it's never too late to build really meaningful relationships still in your life, when you're intentional and create the time and space to do it.
Yeah. And it's very possible. Like I'm sending Jill some like hearts. So that's how we met, right? That's how we
Yeah,
connected.
that's
We
right.
first connected over LinkedIn. And now we're doing this amazing thing together. Like just think back like 4 years ago, we didn't know each other at all.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe, yeah, 4.5 years ago, we didn't know each other at all. And now we're doing this amazing thing. So you're absolutely right. So reaching out to people and connecting, and yeah, having those coffee chats and not eating lunch alone. But then also like, Jill, exactly what you said, like inviting different people to projects. I worked in industry where these amazing projects are happening, but it's the same people that's getting the experience, and you almost have to elbow your way in, but if you're not an elbower, you don't find your way in there. So as leaders, how do we make sure the people who are elbowing, they get in, but also the people that are not elbowing, how do they get in and get some different experience so that so that other people can grow and it is this inclusive environment.
One of the other, Jill, when you brought up a second ago, organizational culture, and how do, one of the questions I think so many companies are asking, how do we change it? And I know in preparing for this, we had talked about, how do you start seeing change? And I know one of the things that I'm super passionate about is like being the change that you want to see. And I know that sounds cliche, right? And T, I might be like jumping in on your question here, but it's a topic I want to touch on because it's, I even saw somebody recently post on this, and I thought it was a really somebody post on LinkedIn about this, and I thought it was a really good example. We talk about, okay, we want a workplace culture of flexibility, right? How do we empower people to own their work, to own their schedule and be flexible? But what does that look like in real life and in daily actions? And it could be, okay, and a manager says, yes, you have flexibility, I have full trust in you. And now that employee is in a team meeting and says, I got to leave to go pick up my kid from soccer practice, I got to jump 20 minutes early. What type of response are colleagues, are those peers giving to that individual? Is the daily action of those peers saying, is it a judgment, a judgment response? Or is it like, good for you, see you later, thank you so much, have a good night? What are we doing daily? And I always think, be the change. And so holding ourselves, looking in the mirror and saying, if I want flexibility given to me, what type of flexibility am I extending to my teammates? What type of understanding am I giving to other individuals, to make that a workplace reality for everybody?
Yeah.
like to bring that up.
That's fantastic. And it's one of the things where I sometimes, and we run into people like this too, it's the reason why we talk to people and say, yes, you can be a catalyst in your organization, even though you're not CEO or you're not C whatever, fill in the acronym that starts with a C. You can be that change by exactly doing what you're saying, Angela. How are you treating your peers, right? Like, how are you showing up differently for your peers, for your team, for your leaders even, right?
Yeah.
Like, we also influence our leaders where we give them grace, right? And we're having conversations with them. And, I've seen people completely change the way their leaders interact with all of their team members because of the way that they interact with their leader, where their leader's like, oh, I should do this with everyone. I'm glad you brought this up, or I'm glad you brought up this format, or whatever it happens to be. So each of us have that power. We don't need the title to do things, right? Like, we can make these changes and then they just spread, right? Because it will make you successful with the right skills, with the right tools, with the right resources. You will be successful. And then people want to know, wow, how is this group working so well together? How are they completing things faster, quicker than others?
Yeah.
Why are they laughing when I feel like,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, like Tia, like you said, it's part of that, like stepping into your power, because so often the conversations that we hear is, well, top leadership has to be the one to drive culture change. And our position on that is no, because if we keep waiting, we're going to keep being where we are, which is we feel like we are not empowered to make the change. And then we can't fully live our best selves. So really it's about us, and these leadership happens in these little moments. Like you said, it's that moment where you notice, like, right? Like, oh, did I respond in a way that is supportive or a way that actually is keeping us all back and limiting where we can go? And even when somebody else says something, you could be like, huh, that's an interesting approach. Lately I've been working on how to be more supportive in how I'm, showing up. And your comment reminds me of this. So opening conversations is how we start shifting culture, but it's like one conversation, one moment at a time.
Yeah. And that takes skill. That's one thing that, people don't realize, is that it seems like, oh, just do it, right? Like, just go and have conversations with people, or just go and be inclusive, and just go and do this. But in reality, like, those are skills. It takes skills to provide a safe space for multiple people, right? It takes skill to be able to communicate with multiple types of people. And you should focus on those skills. And, obviously that's what Catalyst is built on, is how do we help our leaders develop these soft skills, these people skills, so that they can help and drive change, true sustainable change within their culture.
I'm going to plug our book club, Alive at Work.
I know she's looking for her book.
I know, that's what I'm looking for, because I think there's also this recognition that when we've been in a culture where they are not willing to give up that power, and we're not able to take that power or step into that power or make the change we want to see. Sometimes it's because we've been living in this space where we've been told no, 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 and that impacts us. Right? It's hard to shift into a spot automatically to be like, yes, 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 yes. It takes time and patience and grace with ourselves as we are navigating to be that change that we want to see. But it is one step at a time. And it is, like you said, a community around us, and helping them be there to support us as we're trying to be accountable to the new behaviors and the new thought processes and mindset that we want to embody.
Yeah. I said on a webinar recently, and they were talking about culture, and the speaker said that they don't believe culture change is hard. It just takes persistence and patience. And we know that's the hard part, right? Is to have that patience and to have that persistence. But she's right, really, right? Like, that's what we have to focus on, is how do we stay persistent? How do we continue to be intentional? Like Angela, you said earlier, on like, you can't take your mind off of it. You have to you have to keep it in the front of your mind on, am I being intentional? Are the people that I'm talking to every day diverse? Let me take a look at who I have speaking to the front of my facility. Do they look like the people they're talking to, or do they look like only one group? Like, keeping that front of mind, that's how you make that change.
I think often, in organizations, we say we're customer obsessed, customer centric.
Yeah.
How cool would it be to say we're culture obsessed, we're
Yes.
community obsessed, like
Yes.
we're so focused on, yes, client is very important, right? You can still have that, but what an interesting pivot that would be if we started saying that
Yeah.
as one of our core initiatives.
Yeah. And it flows.
And I think making this connection, because T and I, we were just talking about this, right? So often we run into organizations that are like, well, we don't need leadership development, but we have all these problems. Like we have limitations on capacity, and we're not making enough profit, and we have too much turnover, and we have this, and we're like, that is culture. Yeah. Culture is about leaders.
Right.
And so I think even as we think about community, like how important it is, like you said, to have an external community to help even open up perspectives and to help be there, because we do have spaces where they're like, we're not meeting what we want, but it's not because of culture. And so you may need some support and just somebody to bring some joy and lift to you. And I think that's like Female in Foods does that in spades. Like, I think I shared yesterday, I was meeting with people that I met through Females in Food, and we were having coffee and great conversation and things that I brought back. And I'm like, not only was it filling my cup, just being in this space with people, but I was actually like, wow, that actually is going to make a difference for me thinking about something in our business.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's huge. No, I appreciate that feedback. And it is important that, that external perspective, that sometimes we need that, right? We need, and not everybody has it. Not everybody has that, a person to go home to, or that best friend, who's in the same industry, who can talk about their day. And I think having a space of individuals that can relate to, one, your industry, to, your job or that function, or maybe some of that solidarity, like that loneliness that you might be feeling. I'm the only one who's experiencing this. And it can be the difference of that person going into a really dark space, right? And potentially looking for another role, external to, gosh, I just needed to process that out loud and get somebody else's perspective to step back in and be really engaged the next day.
Yeah.
In a degree, that's coaching, right? That's coaching from somebody else's part, but not everybody can afford to have a professional executive coach. And I think a community space where you have that peer feedback, or if they're in programs like Catalyst, right, being able to show up and get that coaching from your guys' program, it's huge. It is. It can change careers, for sure.
It really, absolutely. And we've seen it, right?
Yeah.
We've seen it. So I'm curious, as we talk about your community, and as people think about, okay, maybe I do need an external community, and I do need to step out and meet other people outside of my organization, which we 100% encourage. How are you focused on females in food, and just communities in general too? You can kind of talk about how do you really focus on staying relevant and valuable for your members?
Oh, great question. I think from day one, we haven't changed this. And it goes back to, you can't get lazy as far as listening to, being culture obsessed, but also I think that maybe goes back to the client side of it, right? Our members we're member obsessed. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you need. Tell us where the gaps are. The team, the FIF team, like we say, stay so entrenched the community and the regions and having the events. We're not just an online community of resources and professional development and networking, but we have these regional and national in-person events in which that in-person connection offers us so much feedback and gives us the pulse of the community, right? On what do you need right now? What's going on? And it helps them reconnect with our community in person. But we the team, the ambassadors are constantly bringing back information to us on, hey, we need, as an example, we've been hearing we need negotiation training. The community as women, we want negotiation training. And Tia, it was you who I reached out. I'm like,
Yes.
do we know? I mean, because it's really hard to find somebody to train. We wanted a woman specifically to be able to offer that perspective and train on negotiation in our community. And so, I mean, me leaning on my external community, Tia, you were able to recommend somebody in your network to run this workshop, right? And so, we are obsessed with feedback and what can we do to make it better? What can we do to serve you? And we're consistently every day reaching out to our members in personal emails saying, how are you? What support do you need? How can we support you in your goals? Do you need personal introductions? Do you need a specific resource? And I think that's really how we strive to stay relevant to our members. You have to stay entrenched, right? It's be at a 10,000 foot view and expect to hear what's going on at the ground level.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so many great nuggets that you just said, especially as we think about it from a corporate standpoint and building corporate culture, getting that feedback from your members or from your team members. But I feel like the most important thing that you said is that you are acting on the things that you're hearing and the feedback that you're getting. And it's not just written feedback, right? Like we all think about those assessments and those surveys and they come back and a small group kind of decide what to do based off of this written survey versus like actually going out and having conversations and saying, wow, this is something we've noticed in this question. Let's dig a little deeper to find out exactly what is it that our members need? What is it that our team members need, right? That makes up this culture. And then how can we get it for them?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we stay within our values and give it to them?
Exactly. How do we make this possible? And, I know the transformational moment in my career where I was very young in my career and it was a BU leader at the company that I was at. I should say, I shouldn't use acronyms, business unit leader. And we were standing side by side at the coffee shop there on campus. And he stopped as he was getting his coffee and just struck up conversation with me, right? I was just out of school, entry level position. And he stood there for a good 20 minutes just talking, how are things going? What's it like? Getting the data points, right? He clearly had a lot of meetings and places to go. But I was on a conversation recently with a vice president of a Fortune 500 company. And she said to me, if you're in a leadership position, a VP or above, and you're not spending at least 80% of your time on talent, you're doing something wrong. Right. And I think that's a nugget that really stuck with I'm not sure what's happening.
And I think even your computer's like cheering for that.
Was amazing.
I'm like, are you guys seeing?
I've never seen that before. That was amazing. But literally I was like boom, boom, boom. And your computer
great timing.
Oh my gosh, I've never seen that happen before. Wow, smart
awesome.
technology.
Like, perfect timing.
So yeah, she, I thought that was such a great nugget of if you're at this level and you're not spending that much time on talent, you're not doing something right. And so yeah, I leave that as a little nugget.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's amazing because it's like that. I want to throw in again, like that takes skill to do, right? It takes skills to be able to connect. It takes skills to be able to focus on that talent and foster that talent and grow that talent. And what we find is that leaders, they're not spending their time there. They also don't have the skills to spend their time there. So we lean on the things that we know what to do, right? And in our field, a lot of time, that's our technical knowledge, right? We lean on project management and HACCP and risk assessments and all of those things where it's like, yeah, let's do this problem solving, and we raise our hands as leaders and we're doing it. And other people are like, well, we don't really need you to do that. We need you to actually focus on people and focus on that talent, because if you're not as a senior leader, then who is?
Yeah,
no one.
No,
exactly.
And I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, it's kind of a plug, but in fall we have strategic leader cohort opening, because part of it is when we think about our function and we think about how it evolves as we even move up the ladder. So often what we've seen, and it's not just in food safety and quality, we've seen it in other disciplines or other functional areas as well, where we just keep taking on more of similar work that we've done, but maybe bigger projects or things that are considered more high stake, when really our proportion of task driven activity should be shifting so that we have more space for people activities. Yeah. And that gets so lost. And so part of our strategic program is about really inviting people to think about how you would redesign your function and looking at what do you need to actually grow and nurture your teams to be able to have the success that you want, versus always feeling like you're behind the 8 ball, or we're always out of time, or we're always, my favorite, firefighting. We're always firefighting.
Yes.
We've built that into our system. So if we want it out, we also have to be willing to step in and build it out of the system.
Yeah. Yes. And so even when we talk about like senior leaders where like they should be the ones driving culture, that type of thing, we would prefer you focus on, right, like setting that vision and focusing on talent and removing barriers, right? So that the true drivers of your culture, which is really your middle managers, they're the ones that's actually driving your culture. Empowering them and giving them the tools to actually do that job, right? And focusing on the other very important job of talent development and making sure they have the right resources in place so they can grow their teams. So, and Jill said it earlier, like we're on a mission to change how we lead, because that's when we see that growth. Right? That's when we see the growth in people. That's when we see the growth in organizations, because there's some organizations out there that has got it figured out, right? And they are living this way and they see the benefits of it. They see the benefits in retention and engagement, right? They see the benefits in business growth and profits. They see the benefits of community internally, but also how their people connect externally to communities, right? They're the ones that's giving to external communities. Yeah. Because they have those skills and those tools. And many, some people are lucky enough that their organization are there, but, we're on a mission to get more organizations there. And it's critical. It's critical in all industries. It's really critical in the food industry because, we know where we are, right? We see the retention issues that we're having. We see the engagement issues. We see the quote unquote lack of people, because people don't want to live in environments that they don't feel like they belong, or that they don't feel like that they're appreciated, or that they can speak up, or that they are empowered to make decisions. We're seeing the effects of those things. And we have to make that change and that shift.
Yeah. And I'm that's why I'm just so impressed what you guys are doing at Catalyst, right? And what the resource that you guys are providing to organizations, but also Females in Food, and what we're doing, right? But I always say not enough can be done until we have complete resolution to all of these issues, right? We should continue to strive forward and push to continue to offer these resources and solutions.
Yes.
I love that you have that, Angela, because there is space for all, for all the support. And I think we'd even talked about that, because one of the things that had come up in a recent conversation was somebody said, gosh, why do you need another women's group? Like, doesn't that divide women out more than bring them together? And I love the conversation we had about that, where it's like, well, one, there is space, and two, like, community is so important and means something different to different people.
Yeah.
So how do we really, once again, invite people in, be more inclusive? Tia, I love when you always talk about, like, do people look like me, see like me, have experiences like me? There are so many different factors to consider when we think of creating communities that really capture the belonging that we want to create in spaces for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a need, right, for different types of community, right? We need to create these spaces where people feel safe and they can be vulnerable and candid, and get that feedback. But it's also, that they can show up and get what they need, so that they can step into these other spaces. I think you were saying, Tia, to really show up in their most empowered way in these other spaces.
Yeah.
And I personally feel like there is space and there is need for various types of communities throughout the industry. To your point, why another women's group, right? We're all doing something a little different, and I think each person may need something different out of that space. And they all serve a unique purpose, and finding that space that's right for you, so that you can get what you need out of that to ultimately step into your most empowered way in the workplace. I think is the purpose.
Yeah. And I love the way you bring up the word vulnerability, right? And because for us to be able, as leaders, to be able to provide safe spaces for others, to be able to, really drive culture and set that vision for culture, we have to have these spaces where we can feel vulnerable, right? And groups like Females in Food allows for people that want to connect in that group to feel vulnerable, right? And to share things that they might not feel comfortable sharing in other spaces. But that group gives them the tools to be able to step outside and say, okay, how do you share your truth outside of this group? It's almost like kids at home, right? Where you can mess up at home, you can have these conversations, you can say, oh, my friend did something that, didn't sit right with me. And you have that conversation with your mom or your dad or your grandma or your cousin. And they're like, oh, did you talk about this? Or did you ask this question? Or how would you explain it to them? Yeah, say that. And then they're able to step into that group, that space, right, with their friend and say, hey, I really didn't like the way you said this. Let me tell you the way it made me feel. But they've already done this trial run with someone that they feel safe with, right? Someone that they can mess up with, but there's no real consequences around it. That's how I almost think about these groups, right? And our audience know, I started the Black Professionals in Food Safety and Quality group back in 2021. And that's what that group is there for our Black professionals, is that they can speak and talk and discuss and have these conversations to prepare them to go and back into their workplace, and have those same scary conversations. They just have already had a trial run with people that they feel close to, right? That they feel like that they can be vulnerable with, that they have these safe spaces. And it doesn't mean other people can't be there to help, right? Like, we need allies. Right? We need allies to these groups. And your role might not be, hey, I'm at every meeting and I'm having these conversations with them. Your role might look different for those groups. But we do need other groups to step in, and be allies to our groups, because that's how we see that change, right? We can't do it alone.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, it's so important. And I think you said it extremely well. We absolutely need allies. You cannot do it on your no group can do it on their own. But having that, I can't tell you how many times we've role played conversations in the group, right? Because when you're going through something hard, it is so difficult to see clearly enough to come up with what you want to articulate and process what you want to say. And I think being able to practice that first in a safe space, and also just get that unbiased opinion and perspective from other people, but it makes a big difference when you're going back into that conversation, even when you're negotiating for a new job, right?
Ooh, yes.
You think you've gotten to that last spot and you're like, I really want this job. There's so much fear-based, people are coming from a place of fear in going into that conversation, like they're going to take it away, or what are they going to think of me if I ask for this? And that's why so many people don't negotiate, right? You get to the last block, and that last step, and they just say yes and leave so much on the table. I think so often that's when our confidence dips the lowest, and we're not willing just to come up and ask for what we really want. And it's so important. And
it really is.
It's a space that we spend a lot of time talking about inside the community. So
yes.
Oh,
well,
there's so many takeaways.
Yes. And we would love to hear, from our conversation we had today. Judith, thank you for joining us from Germany. This has been such a great talk and so many wonderful nuggets along the way. What do you hope our audience step away with? Like, even if it's one or two things that you hope our audience take away with as they think about building community and corporate culture?
Yeah, I think be the change, right? Change starts with each and every person. And I think, also be willing to use your voice and speak up, and one, ask for what you need, but also be willing to share what you know. And I think those are the two things. I mean, the two things that, we say in the FIF community, this is not a passive experience, and we all show up with the intention of a give and a get. And I think that has transformed what has happened and how our community thrives so easily. And I think that could be taken into so many communities and workplaces and replicated. So that would be my advice.
Love it. I love it. Be the change. Be active.
Be active. Show up, and be willing to speak up. Use your voice. Ask for what you need, and share what you know. Yeah.
So, Angela, if people are going, how do I find you? How do I find Females in Food? Where's the best place for them to go?
Absolutely. Well, I love for anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn, Angela Dodd, send me a note. But also follow us on LinkedIn, femalesinfood.community. That is also our website, femalesinfood.community. And they can get involved if you want to join our collective or our membership community. You can do so straight from the website. Also invite, if you're interested, if you're an employer and want to learn more about what our corporate memberships and collaborations look like, or just want to see what one of our upcoming events are. We have Minneapolis and Chicago right around the corner for some in-person events. Something always going on. It's all on the website. So be sure to check it out, or just also drop us a follow on Instagram or LinkedIn as well.
Awesome.
Yes.
Really appreciate you guys having me on today. This is definitely a topic I'm extremely passionate about. So thank you both for the conversation.
Oh, pleasure is ours. Thank you so much for taking time to spend with us, with our audience, and talking about this, because we could talk about it all day too. Yes. So
absolutely. Yes. Thank you for being here. We know that our audience took something away from this conversation. And we hope that it drives change within the organization, and that they connect with you and Females in Food, because it's such an amazing organization.
Yep. And my last plug, Alive at Work. It's our book club next Tuesday. There's still time, even if you haven't read the book and you want to talk about being alive at work, join in the conversation. It's in the Catalyst community, which you can join from our website as well. So we'll hopefully see you there. Yeah. Otherwise, we will be back here next week, same time, same place, with another episode of Real Talk. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us.
Yes, absolutely. And we will see you next week at Book Club. and on live.
Yes. Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.